All right, let's dive in. We are living through what people are calling a psychedelic renaissance. These compounds, the ones that once defined the counterculture, are now at the forefront of a revolution in clinical research. But what if the most famous part of a psychedelic experience, the trip, isn't actually the most important part? Let's get into the new science that's looking way beyond the trip.
So why all the excitement? Well, it's pretty simple. Substances like psilocybin and LSD are showing some incredible, and I mean fast-acting therapeutic potential. We're talking about some of the toughest, most stubborn mental health conditions out there, and these compounds are offering a totally new kind of hope. So naturally, scientists are racing to figure out exactly how they work. So here's the roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll set the scene with this psychedelic renaissance. Then, we're going to meet the so-called trip receptor, the one that for decades everyone thought was the star of the show. And right after that, we're going to challenge that entire idea by asking, is the trip even necessary for the therapy to work? That one question is going to lead us to some of the brain's hidden levers, and finally, bring us to the next generation of mental health treatments that are already being created.
Okay, first up, this renaissance. For decades, these molecules were pushed to the absolute fringes. But today, they represent one of the most promising frontiers in neuropsychiatry. They've made this incredible leap from the counterculture right into the cutting-edge clinic.
And the sheer range of what they might treat is just staggering. It's not just treatment-resistant depression or PTSD anymore. We're seeing real promise for substance use disorders, everything from alcohol to opioids. And now researchers are even starting to look at them for things like anorexia and chronic pain. It just goes to show how profound their impact could really be.
Right. So to really get what's so new and exciting, we have to understand the old story. For about 50 years, the science of how psychedelics work had one main character, this one superstar receptor that seemed to explain pretty much everything.
And here it is, the serotonin 5-HT2A receptor. This thing is found all over the brain's cortex, and for the longest time, it was considered the master switch. The thinking went like this. A psychedelic like LSD binds to it, flips it on, and boom, you get those profound changes in perception and consciousness that we call the trip.
Now, take a look at this diagram. It really visualizes that classic thinking, right? You see, the psychedelic molecule comes in and it can hit a few different things, but for ages, all eyes were on that blue one, the 5-HT2A receptor. The logic was so clean. Activate 5-HT2A, you get the trip, and the trip creates the therapeutic benefit. It was a neat, tidy story. But, science just loves to complicate a tidy story.
And this is where the story takes a massive turn. This brings us to a huge, pivotal question, one that really challenges that entire foundation we just laid out. It's a question that could literally change the future of mental health care.
What if you could get the healing without the hallucination? Now, this isn't just some philosophical thought experiment. This was sparked by real-world observations, like a case study of a patient who was taking another medication that happened to block that 5-HT2A receptor. They were given psilocybin, and they still got the antidepressant effects, but without the trip. All of a sudden, that tidy story just didn't hold up anymore.
And the implications of this are absolutely huge. Just look at this breakdown here. On the left, you've got the classic model, an intense, hours-long session that needs a ton of costly, close clinical supervision. But on the right, that's the goal, a second-generation drug that could be non-hallucinogenic, cheaper, and way more accessible for a wider range of people. You can see why the motivation to untangle these effects is just enormous.
Okay, so if that 5-HT2A trip switch isn't the whole story, then what else is going on under the hood? This is where the detective work gets really fun, because scientists started discovering this whole network of other, hidden levers that these drugs were pulling in the brain.
Here's a pretty good way to think about it. Imagine that 5-HT2A receptor is the lock on the front door. For years, everybody thought that was the only way in. But it turns out, this master key, the psychedelic molecule itself, is also jiggling a bunch of other locks all over the house, opening up totally different doors that lead to totally different effects.
So one of the most important of these other locks is something called the TKRB receptor. Just think of it as the brain fertilizer receptor. In a huge breakthrough, scientists recently found that psychedelics bind directly to this TKRB receptor. And get this, they do it with an affinity 1,000 times higher than traditional antidepressants like Prozac. And activating TKRB is what promotes neuroplasticity, the literal physical growth of new connections between your brain cells.
And this is the absolute kicker.
The brain rewiring, the plasticity-promoting effects that are so critical for helping with depression, all of that can happen through this TR-BK pathway, totally separate from the 5-HT2A pathway that causes the trip. This was the smoking gun everyone was looking for.
And TrkB isn't even the only other player in the game. Researchers are finding other serotonin receptors are involved too. And then there are some real wildcard mechanisms being explored, like an enzyme that might let these compounds physically change proteins in a way that could alter how genes are expressed for a long, long time. The complexity is just breathtaking.
So, what does this all mean in the real world? How does this new science translate into actual treatments? Well, this isn't just theory anymore. This new understanding is already being used to design a completely new class of medicines for mental health.
And a perfect example of this is a molecule called 2-bromo-LSD. You can think of it as a close chemical cousin to LSD, but it's been engineered with one critical difference. It's not hallucinogenic. This little compound is basically the real-world application of all this groundbreaking new research.
The results in early studies are pretty remarkable. 2-bromo-LSD seems to promote neuroplasticity and has antidepressant effects, just like its famous cousin, but without the trip. On top of that, it doesn't seem to build tolerance, and it even has a better safety profile because it avoids a receptor that's been linked to heart issues. It's essentially designed to give you all the therapeutic goods without any of the hallucinogenic baggage.
You know, the scientists who made that big TrkB discovery put it perfectly. They said that the therapeutic plasticity-promoting effects can be detached from the hallucinogenic ones. That quote right there is really the main takeaway of this entire new chapter in psychedelic science.
And that leaves us here, with a question that honestly would have sounded like pure science fiction just a decade ago. We have always linked the power of these molecules with that profound reality-bending experience. But what if the next giant leap in treating depression is a psychedelic that rewires your brain for the better without you ever feeling a thing? The answer to that could redefine medicine as we know.